Hi guys, welcome back. I'm glad you could join me today. So today we're going to be taking a look at a machine called Attacktive Directory. So this is hosted on TryHackMe, and it is one of the free TryHackMe rooms. So some of the rooms on TryHackMe, and rooms being what they call the machines on there, some of the rooms are subscription only, and a subscription is $10 a month. But if you don't have that right now, that's completely fine. For this room, like I say, it is one of the free ones. So if you don't even have an account, that's okay too. Just go ahead and go register one right now. Pause the video, come back when you've done that, and then get this all fired up on TryHackMe. And even with a free account, you can follow along with us here. And so let's go ahead and get started with our Nmap scan, which you can see I've already done and printed out here for us. So the first thing I want to point out though on this scan is that with TryHackMe, every time you start a machine in a room, it gives the machine a different IP address. And so you might notice that this IP here that was scanned is not going to be the same IP that we're going to be using as we move along here. And that's why this was just from a different instance of the machine. I just didn't want to bore everyone, with the details of watching another scan run. It's kind of like watching paint dry sometimes. And I didn't want to bore myself with that either. So I just went ahead and used this other scan. But because it is the same machine and just a different instance of it, all of the ports will be the same. So let's go ahead and take a look at those. So right off the bat, the first thing that you would probably want to notice about this machine is that it is a domain controller. And you might have noticed that, or kind of been alluded to that by the name of it. And also the TryHackMe room itself kind of guides you through a lot of this stuff on this particular room. And so it would just tell you that up front. But in a real situation where you didn't have anything to go off of other than this, initial enumeration, the way that you would determine that it is a domain controller is through a couple of ports. So namely, you have 88 for Kerberos, you have 389 for LDAP, you have maybe 464 for this K password, and then putting those all together along with this 53 for DNS are basically the the main key takeaways to show you here that it is a domain controller. Now, another couple things that we have on this machine though are going to be 80 for HTTP, 445 for SMB, and 3389 for remote desktop. So you can see from the output right here that the HTTP is just serving a default IIS page. Now, normally, sometimes you might want to look at that anyway, maybe look at the source code, maybe directory bus this server to see if there's anything else hidden behind there. But just to save time here, I can tell you that you're not going to find anything. That's not the way we need to go on this particular machine. So the same with the 445, that we're actually going to come back to in a little bit. But for right now, again, there's nothing there for us. And then the 3389, that most of the time, if you don't have credentials, that's not really going to be super useful right off the bat. And again, kind of the same thing here. That's not really going to be useful. Although there is something we're going to look at on this in just a second here, but we'll come back to that in just a moment. But what is being left though is kind of a main thing here is the Kerberos. So, and it being, domain controller, Active Directory based, that is what we are going to be attacking. So in order to do that, the first thing that we can do is use kind of a built-in flaw in Kerberos to be able to tell what users are on the machine. Now, to do that, we are going to need a user list, and that is provided by the room. So there's a user list and a password list. The room creator was nice enough to just provide these with the room, and you can just download them from TryHackMe from the room page. So just know that that's what I've done. Now, in a real situation, you could use like SecList top 100 or top 1000 users or any common username list and password lists. Of course, there's tons of them like RockYou and whatnot like that. But but in this case, like I say, the room creator has just provided these for us just to make our lives a little easier and faster. And then again, this is nothing that I have done special here. I just downloaded these already from the room page. But then that being said, what we are going to do first with this user list to try to determine which of these are valid machine users and domain users is we are going to use a tool called Kerberos. Now, Kerberos is not installed on Kali by default, and it's actually not available in the Kali repositories either, but that's okay because it is hosted on GitHub, and there's actually precompiled binaries available for it. And so I'll have a link to the GitHub down below this video in the description. And it's also linked to on the TryHackMe room. But basically you just download the binary and change mode +X to make it executable, and you're good to go. It's real simple, real easy to use. Couldn't be easier, really. So I have already done that. I have it up here in the tools directory under Kerberos. So we can go ahead and get started with running it. So we are going to want to use the user enum option to or argument to Kerberos with the switch D option for domain, and then we'll come back up here real quick and I said there was one thing we were going to get under this R desktop output, and that is the name of the domain. So we have here the domain, the name of the machine, Attacktive Directory .spookysec.local, which is the name of the domain. So we need to provide that to Kerberos, and then we need to provide the IP address or host name of the domain controller that is going to be attacked. So I'm going to copy that off of the TryHackMe page. Go ahead and paste that in there. And then last thing we need is just a user list, just a text file with usernames in it for Kerberos to try. And so we have the user list that we already talked about. So go ahead and fire that off. So while that's running, I just want to point out one thing though, is that Kerberos, every other time I've run this, it runs really fast and it will just rip through even like thousands of usernames in a file and then bloop, pop out at the other end and it's done, right? Well, this, for some reason, every time I've run it against this machine, it goes kind of slow and it'll eventually kind of hang up. I don't know why it does that on this machine, but normally you don't have to worry about that. But, again, just to kind of make our lives a little easier and faster here, I'm going to kill this manually. And after, there's a couple of specific usernames that we're looking for. And once those pop up, I'm going to go ahead and kill this just so that we don't have to let it, kind of get, run until it gets kind of hung up. But it should be any second here now. I think there's maybe just like one or two more that we need. That ought to do it. Yeah, because that's got the two in it. Yeah, okay. I think that's all we're gonna really need out of it. So like I said, just, every other time I've done this, this hasn't been necessary to kill it manually, but, it is what it is on this one. So then we are going to need just these names. So this is really cool, pretty output that it gives. But we are going to really just need just these names. And so we are going to copy this and we're going to manually paste it into a text file. We'll call it domain users.txt. Doesn't really matter what you call it, but that's just what makes sense in my mind, so that's what I'm going to call it. And And as I'm getting this going, I did just want to point out to you, this is kind of the poor man's way of doing this, copy and paste it out of the terminal. So normally what you would be able to do, and what we'll do a little bit later here, is pipe the output from this command directly into a text file. But Kerberos, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments if this isn't right, but I believe Kerberos does not have an option to put just any of this output into a file on its own. And so the problem with Kerberos is if you pipe the entire output of the command into a file, it will save this really nice looking ASCII header for you. And that will mess up some of the processing that we're going to do. So that's why we're in this case, you might think, oh, like, I got to turn in our Linux nerd card because we're doing it the, the regular user way here. But that's why, because we really just want this output. We don't want this, stuff up here. So anyway, we got that copied and pasted in. So let's go ahead and save it. And then we are going to run a pretty long command line here, but it is basically going to chunk all this up and spit out just these names here. And so to do that, we want to cat domain users.text. We will pipe it to translate with a switch of S for squeeze. With space argument. So that is basically just going to take these spaces here and maybe right here where there's more than one space, and I'm just going to squeeze it down to just one space, which will be important here in just a second. So then we're going to pipe that output to cut with a delimiter of space, just a single space, and that is why the squeeze is important, because we do just want one space here. And then we are going to cut just the 7th field, because if you can imagine that these, anything here that's separated by a space is a field. And so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Wait, sorry, that's not right. Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There we go. Sorry, guys. It's kind of late here when I'm doing this recording, and I forgot how to count for a second. But yeah, okay. So 7. So this whole thing here in this stream will be the 7th field, and so that's getting pretty close to what we want, but we still don't want this at domain here on it. We really just want the username just all by itself. So a little bit more processing to do. We will pipe that to another cut command with a delimiter of at, and then the first field. So if you can imagine that at this point we're dealing with just this right here, and cutting it apart on the ats leaves field 1 and field 2, and we want just field 1. Then almost lastly, we are going to pipe it to a unique sort, because you can see that also, I believe this is a little bit of a weirdness with Kerberos' interaction with this particular machine. But you can see that it's spit out 2 different Jameses, a capital James and a lowercase James. And so just to make our lives a little bit easier, we don't really want to deal with that, because most tools, aren't really going to distinguish, especially on a Windows machine, between those two. So we'll just get rid of that with a unique sort and ignoring case with the F. Then now lastly, I might have said lastly on that sort, but this is actually lastly, we are going to pipe it to T domain users.text, and that the T will just print it out to the screen so that we can see it's all good, and it will also write it out back out to the file for us. So bloop, and then let's make sure that it put it into the file correctly. It did. All right, cool. We are good to go. All right, so now the next thing we can do here, moving on, is we can use a tool that's part of InPacket. Oh, and I'm sorry, you know what? I should probably go back real quick. I don't think I really talked about how this actually worked, to tell us that which of these users are actually valid. And I won't get into the technicalities of it too much, but I will just say real quick that, and you may have surmised this on your own, but just to point out, the way it did this is that it basically tells Kerberos, hey, Kerberos, I want to authenticate with the James account. And then Kerberos has kind of different response based upon whether or not James or service admin or Robin or whatnot is an actual account or not. So even before it gets to the point of basically when it asks you for a password, based upon the way it does that, or whether or not it does that, will tell you whether or not it's a valid account. So even without knowing anything about the account, anything about, the account password, anything like that, you just say, hey, you're basically able to say, because of a kind of a design flaw in Kerberos itself, you're basically able to say like, hey, Kerberos, is this an actual username or not? And it will tell you, yeah, it is, or yeah, no, it's not. So you can't just tell it, hey, Kerberos, tell me all the users. It won't respond in that way, but for any given username that you want to guess, you can have it tell you, yeah, that's real, or no, you're not, you didn't get that one right. That's not a real user. So anyway, moving forward, we are going to use a tool from InPacket called Get NP Users. And what this is going to perform for us is going to be what's called a ASREP roasting attack. So some users on a Windows domain can have what's known as does not require pre-authentication flag set, and basically that will allow us to pull a Kerberos hash off of those users even if we don't know the user's password. So to do that, we're going to use, like I say, get InPacket, get NP users. We will feed it the domain, which is spookysec.local slash, there is no username because we'll get to that in just a second. That's normally after the slash where you put the username, but we'll get to that in just a second here. No pass, because we want to be really specific that we don't know the user's password. But again, we don't need to for this attack. And then with a user's file of domain users.txt, we could have really just probably fed it the entire user file, but we're trying to be a little bit more efficient here, and we'll just give it the one where we know those are valid users. So then DCIP, which is the IP address of the machine. I'll copy that again real quick. And then output file. I'm going to name this as rep hashes.txt. And then in a format, by default, it puts it into hashcat format. But since I'm on a VM, I find it easier to just use John. And John will be plenty fast for what we're doing. It'll be almost instant. So hashcat would sometimes be faster, but in this case, it just won't matter. And John's just a little bit easier to use, especially on a VM. So go ahead and fire that bad boy off. And you will see it's coming back with what are basically an error stream here, of saying, this doesn't have that flag set, doesn't have the flag set, blah, blah, blah. But you will notice that there's a couple of, there's just one, but there is one account in here that's not listed as doesn't having it set, or as not having it set. And we told it to put that out into this ASREP hashes file. So let's take a look there real quick and see if we did get anything. And lo and behold, what do you know? We got the service admin's Kerberos hash. So That's pretty cool. Now we can't really pass that hash or do anything like that with it with a Kerberos hash, a Kerberos ticket hash like this. But that's okay because we will just go ahead and crack that bad boy with John. We will feed John a password list of password list dot text and the ASREP hashes. And boom, there you go. Management 2005. Not a super great password, but you know, they didn't know any better. So they thought it had, you know, letters and numbers and it was sort of long and you know, they thought it'd be good enough, but you know, it wasn't. So so anyway, now the next thing that we can do is because we have credentials now, we can take this and we could our desktop at this point just to save us a little bit more time. Though I will tell you again that there, you know, you might our desktop to it and upload WinPs or something like that. See if you could escalate privileges, but I will just tell you to save time. That's not what we're gonna need to do here. But what we can do instead is scroll back up here, and you know how I mentioned that we were going to come back to SMB in a little bit? Well, we've reached that time. So now that we have some credentials, we can do some SMB abuse. So we will use SMB client. We're going to want to use a username of spookysec.local slash what was it? Yeah, SVC admin. And then the separator for between username and password on SMB client is a %. Don't ask me why. This seems a little odd to me, but that's what it is. And then we will use that newly found password of newly cracked password of management 2005. We'll do a switch L for list, and then we are going to want to list the contents of any shares on the domain controller. So we have our kind of standard ones here: admin, $, IPC$, net logon, and sysvol. And the this one I think, and then this one for sure is pretty domain controller specific too. But then there's this. These are all pretty standard though, except this one, backup. And you know, you might be thinking, that seems kind of interesting. So let us go ahead and instead of doing a switch L, we will do a connection to that backup folder, or sorry, backup share. Let's ls and see, and oh, what do you know? Backup credentials. Now, backup was one of our users that we couldn't ASREP roast, but holy cow! Look, we might actually have their password, their credential right there. So let's go ahead and get that file. And then we can exit and then ls. Okay, and we have our backup credentials. Well, let's see some credentials. And now, if you're anything like me, you might be thinking, dang, that's a complex password. And then you'd try to use it as such, and you'd quickly be disappointed to find that that's not going to work like that. And so then you'd probably, if you're anything like me, you might beat your head against the wall for a little while until you finally realized that it is base 64 encoded. It's not a password, it's a base 64 encoded string. So let's go ahead and base 64 switch D for decode that file. And then once it's decoded, you see that, oh, okay, it is the base 64 encoding of backup at spookysec.local : password. Here's the password, backup, blah, blah, blah. So now we do have the actual, actual credentials. So now this is not always 100% on cut and dried at this next point, but again, just to kind of shortcut us a little bit here, I will tell you that the first thing that you might want to consider with something called a backup account is that it might be an actual backup account or a backup service account. And what a backup service account might be able to do is replicate certain sensitive data on the domain controller, including passwords for backing up accounts. And so if that is the case, then, if it isn't, this just wouldn't work, what we're about to do. But, so, you can always try it. But if it is the case, what will work is that we can use another in-packet tool called Secret Stump. And so we will just pretty much just run that, and we will feed it the domain. I will actually add the domain as part of the username because it's spookysec.local/backup : the password. I'm not gonna actually. I guess I could have. Well, yeah, okay. I was gonna say I could have copied the whole thing, but no, not necessarily because it's at instead of slash. But anyway, I am gonna copy the password though because I don't want to type all that out and all those numbers. So anyway, okay. So backup : password at the IP of the machine we're trying to attack, which is the domain controller. So I'll copy that, and that's it. Let's fire it off and see what we get. See if this works. Well, that failed. Well, but look, that was using a certain, a certain style of attempting it, and that didn't work. But then it said, nope, that's okay. We'll just use this other method, and then that worked. It dumped the ntds.dit, which contains all of the domain controllers usernames and password hashes. So we don't have all of the passwords for these users, but that is completely fine. We do have the NT hashes, and including for the administrator account, the Kerb TGT account, so we could do an attack called a golden ticket attack. We won't get into that on this video, but what we will do is use this administrator password hash, and then since now these are NT hashes, these are not Kerberos ticket hashes, these are regular NT hashes. Because of that, these we can pass. So we will just go ahead and use that and use yet another in-packet tool called psexec to pass this hash and see if we can get ourselves a administrator or system shell. So we will go spookysec.local/ oops. Wait, hold on. My bad. I lost what I was doing here. Okay, so we actually need to go administrator. Sorry about that. Again, it's kind of. I think I might have mentioned earlier. It's kind of late here. So I'm pretty much gonna nod off after we're done. After we get this all the way finished here in just a second. Anyway. Okay. So administrator. Oh, sorry. I missed one more thing. Administrator : so administrator and then : for where the password would be, but we don't have that, so that's okay. We'll just leave that blank and then paste in at the machine that we're attacking, and then we'll go -hashes. And because instead of having right here the password, we don't have that, but we do have the hash, so we'll paste that in here. Sorry, I think I'd already copied this, and then I copied the IP, and I lost my clipboard, so that's okay. I'll just come back right up here, copy that again. Oops. Okay, hashes. Oh, sorry. I was like, that doesn't look right. That's because we need. So I don't know if you already know this. You might already be familiar, but This is like part of this is the landman hash, and then this is the NTLM hash. Landman hashes are almost always on modern Windows going to be blank, and you can tell that by this AAD3B. If that's what the landman hash starts with, that's the hash of nothing, of just a blank value. So you might be thinking, as I was, that, hey, whatever, this is just junk, I don't need this. But when you're passing the hash with an impacket tool, with psexec anyway, you actually do. You need the entire string, including the blank landman hash. So had I just put in the NTLM hash, that wouldn't have worked, but that's okay. I caught myself. And then go ahead and paste that. And now this should be good to go. So let's try it. And sometimes with some stuff, if it's not right, you could, cause some damage, but with something like psexec, that's usually pretty safe. If you did something wrong, it probably won't do any damage. And honestly, in a training environment like TryHackMe, even if it did, it's not that big of a deal. You could just reset the machine. That's why we're learning here instead of in production. Okay, but well, we did manage to get it right. It looks like, because we did get a shell back. So let's see. Who am I? And I am the system. So I think that's it. We have completely compromised the machine. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. So I will go ahead and close it out here, guys. If you have any questions about this, definitely feel free to leave me a comment. If there's anything else that you particularly want to see next on TryHackMe or even Hack the Box or another platform, definitely let me know that in the comments below too. And lastly, just don't forget to put a like on the video. I'd really appreciate it if you could do that. And do yourself a favor and subscribe to the channel and turn on those notifications so you'll be the first to know and see when we have another great video coming up next. And with that, just have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.